But the title tonight, I'm going to go with it, and it's going to be a little mini-series because it's going to kind of go along with the theme of Sunday morning of the word ignite. And this is part of that. And I just want to, if you haven't watched any of the Sunday mornings, you may want to kind of get a feel of this one. Go back, but if not, I will say this much about the last two Sundays. Is in Genesis chapter 26. We're not getting mic on. Yeah. You're not getting. No volume. In Genesis chapter 26, Isaac is digging wells, and he goes back to his father's wells. He's kicked out of the country. He goes back to his father's wells, Abraham's, to get the water. It's essential to living. So he goes back to wells. And he digs into these wells and finds that the Philistines, the enemy, has dumped all kinds of garbage in these wells, and they can't get to them. They can't get to the wells. So that's the theme for the last two Sundays, and we talked about what that garbage represents. It's keeping you from life, Christ being the issue of life coming out of us, our oneness with Him. And the enemy does everything he can to put garbage in our minds and our thought patterns, creating unbelief, creating veils and principalities that keep the Spirit from flowing out of us. So we are that, out of your belly, he said, John chapter 7, shall flow rivers of living water. So if the enemy can keep those living waters from coming forth, which is your light and glory, then he's keeping the witness dead, keeping people in darkness, because we are the light in the darkness. And if he can keep us in darkness, then darkness begets darkness, and everybody's in the dark, where he calls us to be light. And we have to have the life of God flowing out of us. So we're talking about that. And so one of the things that I want to talk about tonight in reference to that illustration of wells is one of the things that stops up the well is religion. And it is the most predominant one. In fact, I will venture to say that religion is worse than the sin you might be having issue with. Because Jesus has dealt with the sin issue, right? Doesn't mean that you're delivered from it, but at least you know you're halfway to getting your eyes open to being dead to sin, Romans 6. But religion is a counterfeit, and the things that we're doing we think is bringing life, and in reality it's bringing death. So it's really, to me, you know sin is sin, right? Everybody knows what sin is. But we don't know what religion is. So I want to talk about that, and we referenced this a lot over the past years, but we never really dug into it, and that's what we're going to do tonight. The title Christ versus Religion. And so if you got your outline there, look at the intro. Matthew chapter 1. Now, we're only going to be looking at 2 chapters, but we're not going to be looking at those scriptures per se. I'm just referencing them. In Matthew chapter 1, from the book of Matthew, you're going to see in that chapter that all things related to Christ is taking place outside of religion. Now, think about that. You would think that God would use the present religion of the day and stick Christ in it so he can come from it. But you're going to see in chapter 1, he's outside. Everything about Christ, concerning Christ, takes place outside of religion in Matthew chapter 1. In that day, Judaism was the genuine religion, yet everything concerning Christ is going to take place outside of it. Christ has nothing to do with religion. Now, when you think about this, and we're going to go more into detail about it, just see where this goes, because I've got a lot to share. Let's look at, first of all, Christ's birth. It's outside of religion. We just celebrated Christmas. The birth of Christ was outside of Jerusalem, away from the temple, having nothing to do with the holy priest. God did not send Gabriel to the family of the priests. God did not send Gabriel to someone praying in the temple in Jerusalem. The angel was sent to a woman in Nazareth, in Galilee. The angel was sent to a girl, a virgin from a poor family. religion would have passed by. See, religion's not looking for what God's looking for. And that's the problem. Now watch. So the birth of Christ is outside of of Judaism. So and that was the religion of the day. So you'd think that he would go to someone who's devout, who's really in the temple praying every day, fasting every day, preaching the Messiah's. But no one gets picked like that out of religion. It's someone who's not even part of it, who's outside of it, and he goes to a woman. Now watch this. Christ, we say it again, is found out, or the birth of Christ is outside of religion. Now I'm going to say this again because I want it to really penetrate. I really want you to think about this. Because I don't want to rush through this, because I have to meditate on this and go, man, do you understand what that means? That here is Christ. This is the coming Messiah, prophesied in the garden, that the woman's seed will crush the serpent's head. This is what they've been longing for. Every woman would hope that she'd be the one that would carry the Messiah and bring them forth. Now, they didn't know about a virgin birth, but they thought he's got to come by way of a woman. Of course, could it be me? So they were always looking. It's in the prophecies. It's in the prophecies of the writers, the prophets of Jerusalem, of Israel, that a Messiah would be coming. So it's in their writings. They know all about it. And then when God finally sets the date to do it, he does it outside of the camp. Remember, Moses took the tent outside the camp because the glory was outside, not inside? Because you can't get anything done when people are religious. God can't you can get stuff done if you're religious, but when you're trying to get something done, something like this, religion won't allow it. So he has to go outside of Jerusalem, outside the temple, outside of the holy priests, outside the whole thing, and pick some poor little girl and make her be the one. Of course, it's, you know the story. Now watch this. Now let's find how, that's all Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 2, we see Christ found outside of religion. It says birth's outside of religion, but them finding him is even outside of religion, and that's Matthew chapter 2. And that chapter proceeds to tell us how people found this Christ. He was not found in religion. Neither was he found by religious people. Now here's where it gets dicey. How about Anna? Anybody know who Anna is? Who's Anna?
She's the prophetess that lived in the temple.
And she prayed all the time.
Yeah.
And yet, that would be one you might want to do something with. How dedicated is she? Now, I'm not saying she's wrong, but here's the problem with, here's the problem with Anna. She's trying to do something within the framework of religion. You can't do it. You can say this all you want. Well, I have the truth, but God's got me here in this church to be the truth bearer to them. It's not going to go well. Sooner or later, you're going to be asked to leave because he doesn't share. The pastor doesn't share. So while you're going in little groups and you're trying to share truth that's against him, you're going to get sooner or later found out because the people are going to go to the pastor and say, hey, what you're preaching is not what she's saying or he's saying. And then that's never going to work out. Martin Luther, the great reformer, whether you understand this or know it or not, did not want to break from the Catholic Church. He didn't have an axe to grind. He simply put up those 95 theses and say, hey, we got to talk about some stuff. There's some error here. Let's come together as the scriptures say and reason. They wouldn't have it because they're burning these kind of guys at the stake. Because religion doesn't want to be free. In fact, if you look up the definition of religion in one of the oldest dictionaries, it's going to say return to bondage. Because that's what religion is. It's bondage. Bondage to you. Jesus, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Galatians 5:1. It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Well, religion does not want you to know how free you really are. They're afraid of your freedom. Just like natural tyrants today. They're afraid of the people getting their own mind, having their own thoughts, and being autonomous over their own lives. They don't want that. They want to control. And so religion also wants to control. And so they wouldn't have anything to do with it. The religious system and structures will always end up missing Christ. I hate to say that, and I'm not being divisive by telling you this. It's not my intent to be divisive. Because if the truth sets us free, you define freedom then. It's complete freedom. In Christ, to hear, let me tell you about my freedom. One of my freedoms. When I was with the Assemblies of God, I was living in Arizona at the time, and I remember resigning from that denomination. Many of you heard my story, you know why. I'm not going to get into that. But I remember handing in my papers, and everybody was saying, "You can't do that. You're ordained to preach. You're this, that. You can pastor churches." And the Assemblies of God is one of the biggest Pentecostal churches. This is back in the late 80s. And I handed in those papers, and I walked out of that superintendent's office, out of the building in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a beautiful sunny day, which is always sunny in Arizona. But you walk out into that parking lot, head into my car, and I said this to myself: God, now I am free to preach the truth you unveiled to me. Because when you're working under a denomination, you have to line up with their 16 tenets of faith. And if you break off of that, someone's going to turn you in. And you know how they control you? If you preach that, we'll have your papers. They always had your papers as a way to control what you believed and what you taught. And I just, God set me free from denominationalism. Denominationalism is not godly. It's a man's attempt to divide the church. In fact, that's one of the sins of the flesh in Galatians 5 is division. And but anyway, so religion wants to control you. Governments, secular governments want to control you. We see that right now in cancel culture. You see that? That ain't nothing new. I dealt with that with Assemblies of God in the 80s. You preach that, we'll cancel you. What's it? I always said, watch our government and watch the church. They line up together every single time. One's just a spiritual deception, and the other's a physical deception. I hate to say that, and I'm not being divisive. I want you free. And the only way to have Christ be formed in you and to live for that water to come out and gush out, do you really feel that that's where the church is at? Are we a church where the water's flowing out like Ezekiel in the temple, flowing out and healing the nations and people are getting saved and the light and the glory of God is being manifested in our presence? You're not seeing that because the wells have been dumped into called religion. Bad theology, so forth. We talked about that Sundays. That's why you got to listen to Sunday. All right? Anyway, so Christ was not found by any of the priests. They didn't show up giving gifts. And any of the holy people. Do you see Anna there with a gift? I'm not pounding on Anna, except the fact that people have used her as an example for 24/7 prayer and a lifestyle. That's religious. And I'm going to prove it to you here in a minute as we go through this. And that's why Anna seemed to just, where was she at? She was probably the most devout, devoted one, but she was in the framework of religion. And God can't use religion. I don't care who's in it. He was birthed outside of religion, and he's found outside of religion. And it doesn't matter to God who's involved in religion. He's still going to be outside of it. They're going to have to leave religion to see him. As Moses had to leave the camp and pitch his tent outside to be with God. God's presence moved out of the camp. He moved and pitched his tent outside of it. You're not going to find Christ in religion. And I'm going to prove to you that the majority of churches are stooped in it. And again, God knows my heart, that's why I keep saying I'm not being divisive. I feel like John the Baptist crying out, guys, do you want the truth? Do you want the life? Do you want the light and the glory? Or are you okay with having your well stopped up by preachers and teachers and brothers and sisters in the Lord that's peddling this garbage? Nevertheless, let's move on. All right, so the heavenly star. This is, you're going to find all this in Matthew chapter 2. The heavenly star appeared before who? Heathen men. Pagan country. Do you realize that? Now, I know we've hit on this over the last couple of years, but like I said, we're zeroing in on it this time. So this star appears before heathen men, magi, from a pagan country. A people that don't have a Bible, they don't have a genuine religion. You would call them New Age. You would probably call them New Age. And this star appeared to these guys, and they were from the east. Now, if you know anything about the maps, if you kind of have an idea where Israel is west. Israel is east of us. But Israel is west to the Iraq, Iran, and that area, probably Iran, Persia, is where these guys came from. So it's an eastern, this star from the east is leading them to Bethlehem. Now, here's the thing about these magi. And that is that, how did they know, how did God, and this is so phenomenal, and I just heard someone the other day talk on this, so I'm like, okay, this is good. This adds to the riches of this teaching tonight. But anyway, if you understand that area, where did Daniel get taken into captivity? Babylon. That's Iraq. So in that region, Iran, Iraq, the Persian area there, he's taken captive there. And he goes into the education of the Babylonians. And he's raised to talk their language, to know their culture, everything. And he's part of these guys. The Bible, your Bible refers to them as wise men, but really it's magi. And when he graduated smart, he became part of that fraternity of magi. So Daniel was part of magi 2,000 years before this even happened. The reason I'm bringing this up is because Daniel was the one who probably pinpointed the coming of the Messiah right down to the time frame. And no other prophets like Daniel did that. So Daniel knew this 70 years and so forth as you go through that. So Daniel's taking these prophetic writings of the Old Testament prophets. They take them with him. And so he's sharing these with the people that he knows. That he's as part of that magi. Now here's the interesting thing. Now, of course, Daniel dies, but they get delivered back to Israel, to Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple through Ezra, who takes on the spiritual aspect of it, Nehemiah, who takes on the physical walls. So they go back and they prepare the temple, and then you've got 400 years. They call it the silent years, but a whole lot went on there. A lot of history went on there. And that's where you get those books that the Catholic Church has called the Apocrypha. That's the 400, so they call it silent years. And then, of course, Christ comes on the scene. But what I want you to see is for 2,000 years, these manuscripts are passed around, and these magi's are into astronomy, astrology, everything, because they're seekers of truth. They may not find the truth, but they're looking for it. And they've got these Jewish documents, these prophecies we would call of the Messiah. So they knew very well about this. So God uses Daniel 2,000 years ago, plants that seed, these documents, in that area, and it's permeating for 2,000 years, being read. They know about him. And then this star, which they're into astrology and astronomy, so God's going to use what they're into. God's going to enter into their darkness, heathen people who don't believe right. He's going to enter into their darkness, and they're going to be the ones who find the Messiah. Why? Why?
They were looking. They were interested.
Because of God told, where did Abraham come from? Land of the Chaldeans. Where's that at? Babylon. So God goes to Abraham and says to him, I am going to bless you and all the families of the earth. So God promised Abraham, the crew you're coming out of, the Magi is going to be part of, they're going to be blessed too. And I'm going to them, and they're going to be the one, not the guys in Jerusalem serving the temple in religious practices. Is that not amazing? How it all, so God's like full circle. Pulls Abraham out, sends Daniel so many years later, sends the documents over there. They're brewing on it. They know about it. And then God, one day when it's time for the Messiah to come, puts a star that they're into all that. And that they follow that star right to where the Messiah was. And they know, and you want to write this down, Micah 5:2. This is one of the prophecies, and they knew about it. Okay? Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Now, these men were exercising their natural minds. They were into many religious manuscripts, astrology, as I said, it's all down there. And they found him by way of the star and the scriptures, Micah 5:2. Now, the scribes and the Pharisees, that's the religion of the day, Judaism, had the same knowledge. They told Herod of the prophecy, yet they did not seek where Christ would be. Now, understand why they're telling Herod. Herod gets the throne by killing all his family. And so anybody that he thinks is rising up, insurrectionist, or somebody who's trying to get a following, they're dead meat. So by the way, it's not 3 wise men. We don't know how many there were. Just because there were 3 gifts, we think there are 3. If you read literally Matthew 1 and Matthew chapter 2, you're not going to see 3 men. And they're not kings. These 3 kings traveled so far. No, they're not kings. And there's not 3 of them. We don't know. That's all assumed. So, and plus they've got servants with them, a caravan, gold, myrrh, what's the other one? Frankincense, and they're carrying a caravan. So here comes into Bethlehem all these camels, all this treasury, all the gifts, everything, and servants. So this is a huge caravan coming in, and Herod wants to know what's going on. Wait, what are you? I'm king. What's happening here? Because he's very insecure as a king. And they tell him. So they know. So he gets the scribes and the Pharisees and says, hey, what? And they're like, yep. And they take him to Micah chapter 5, verse 2. Let's read it. But you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. This is the scripture that the Magi knew, and that also the Pharisees and Sadducees knew. Now, these guys are going to travel, and it's going to take a long time to get from Persia to Israel. And these guys won't go down the street. Religion won't walk down the street to see Jesus, but heathen will travel days, months to get to where Jesus is. What's that say? Religion only talks about the Messiah. They don't really want him. Is that making sense? Now watch. So once news gets out about the birth of Jesus, none go out to behold him. Now the church today is in the same place. We talk about Jesus, but when you look at the sermons and the teachings, they don't unveil him. In fact, they introduce other things that distract you from him. That's all religion has to do. Religion can't expose Jesus, unveil Jesus. All it can do is keep you busy doing things for Jesus, but not actually knowing him. Always got hoops for you to jump through to become what you already are. They don't want, because if Jesus shows up, he's going to upset their apple cart. Did he not? That's why the Pharisees hated him. When you get, and I'm going to show you that we all get attracted to religion, and we don't even realize it. And this is the problem. We too are religious. I'll show you that here in a minute. So none of them go out. Then this is where the church is. We have the scriptures. The church has the scriptures. We have religion. We have added methods, programs, worldly wisdom, and practices. But Christ is not sought. The only thing that's sought and unveiled is the thing they're pushing, promoting, and pumping into the congregation. And it's not Christ. It's the thing at hand. It's the fad at hand. What is it? What is it today? I remember in the 90s, it's church growth. Everything was church growth. Everything was cell groups. Everything was leadership. Everything was this, that, and the other. And it's always been about prosperity. It's always been about end times. They all have their niche. Right now, you know what the niche is? It's the beat up on the government. The niche today is to mix politics and religion. That's the niche today. That's what sells today. Go to a revival and the preacher will down Nancy Pelosi and down the Democratic Party, and you got the room standing clapping and amening. Huh? And I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not a Republican. Here's what I'm telling you. That's revival? I watched it. I saw it. A local church here had a guy. I watched it on YouTube. I said, that's revival? That's unveiling Christ? That's drawing people to Christ? How's that the gospel? How is that the gospel? Downing political leaders. Downing them with no mercy, but hatred. Hatred and contempt for these individuals. So last week I had a message, we of course of the weather, on Jesus being the walking, talking mercy seat, which I was going to do tonight. But I woke up this morning, I don't know what time, it was still dark out, and all of a sudden, I'm not going to tell you what I heard in my spirit because it's not, but it led to this message. So I'm like, crap, I got to put another message together. I thought I had a day off. I spent all day on this. And, but anyway, Christ is not sought. Therefore, we are attracted to all the fads that come up in religion. End times, church growth, leadership, worship, prayer, fasting, revivals, academia, prosperity, success, steps, secrets, keys. Everything is these are things we're promoting. How come I thought Christ was the sum of all things. I thought Christ must have preeminence in all things. Why are these things signs and wonders? We advertise signs and wonders. Would you rather have a sign and wonder or the person himself who does the signs and wonders? Hey, if he does a sign and wonder, that's fine, but I want him. I want him unveiled. Yes. I want a relationship with him. Whatever he does, signs and wonders, that's up to him and our trust in what he's doing. But nevertheless, why do I got to draw people through the signs and wonders? Why do I got to draw people for prosperity? Come to Jesus, he'll heal you. Come to Jesus, he'll make you rich. Well, then these people are coming, and what they really need to know is come to Jesus and be a martyr, because that's what witness means, martyr. It means taking up the cross, and you may not be prosperous taking up the cross. You may not have the fame and fortune promised by these prosperity teachers, the American gospel, by taking up the cross. We're not preaching Jesus, guys. This is all that crap in the well that's keeping the water of revival, true revival of happening. We are administrating the Holy Spirit right out of our churches. And I've been there. And I've been part of that. And I pastored a church over 600 people at the time. So I think we were pushing 650 adults, and you add all the kids of that. But it had a great, we were one of the biggest churches, one of the richest churches in the area. And I'm pastoring this church, and I'm sitting behind my desk. And I'm sitting there, and I said to myself, this is not how it's supposed to be. This is not what a pastor does. I'm in meetings, morning, noon, and night. On call 24/7, hospital out the wazoo visits, and eldership meetings. We had a church, we had a Christian school of over 100 kids, had to exercise administrative stuff over that, and there's always problems there, and everything's a meeting. Then we sit down, we strategize, then we administrate all this stuff. And I sat there and I said to myself, all I am is a CEO of a big business. And I'm like, this is not, and my goodness. And it was then that my world came crashing down, because there was other things in my life. Everything was not what it was supposed to be. I felt like I was living a lie. I felt like I was in a veil, although I wouldn't have called it a veil. But I was not living the truth in any area of my life that was major. Everything was a lie, because religion masked the truth. And so I had a dark season at that point in time of my life. But my point is, this is what people thrive. This is what pastors are thriving on right now: meetings, strategizing, administrating. Oh, we'll do prayer and fasting to make it look like we're doing something, and we'll have good worship. But none of that really matters to Jesus unless He is the center of it and the life in it.
Amen.
And I've got to tell you, there ain't a whole lot of life in worship. It's a spectator. It's become a spectator, and these guys on the stage are the entertainers. And the people sit and watch them do their thing because they don't know how to engage the people to get in.
Yep.
See, like what he just said there. What did you just say?
Yes.
Yep. Now, if I'm getting crickets from this from you guys, and I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, are they not getting it? Do I need to? See, if I'm a worship leader and everybody's just sitting around chewing gum, looking around, I got to realize I ain't doing something's wrong.
Right.
If the people are not engaging with me, what am I? Am I being an entertainer, and all they're doing is being the spectators? So it's whatever gifting you have in the church. Is it a program or a ministry? If it's a ministry, people are being touched. You'll see it.
Right.
You'll hear the amens. You'll see the tears. And you'll hear people go, oh man, that was a good word. You know when the Spirit... So we got to get out of the religious mode, because I don't care how great the worship is. It's just religion if people aren't being moved. And if my messages are not moving people and they're growing, then I got to really look and say, my message is wrong. That makes sense?
Yes.
I don't know. I know why I said that.
Good.
So the star, let's get back to the star. The star, we get to the Magi. Okay. The star appeared outside of religion to a heathen people who were seeking truth. And religion missed the star. Now watch this. When the star took them to where Jesus was, right?
Right.
And they get there, and you know the story. And it says when they left, the star what? Reappeared. So as long as they're in the bedrock of religion, there's no star. The star got them to where Jesus was, not where religion was, but where Jesus was. And then when they left, the star appears again. So understand something. When I say that outside of religion, Mary conceived Jesus in Nazareth of Galilee. But as they were traveling, she goes into a manger in Bethlehem in the area of Jerusalem. So she was only there enough to have the baby, and then it says that they went to the home. So they showed up at the home. Jesus had already been born. Okay, so otherwise Jesus only was born in Bethlehem just long enough for Micah 5:2 to be fulfilled, and then God took him right out. And when they left, the star appeared again. What does that mean? When religion will never draw a star. Let's say it's the glory of God, the star, the Holy Spirit who leads and guides us. Won't lead you to religion. It's going to lead you to Jesus.
Right.
But if you stay there, Jesus is not going to stay there, because we know he ends up where for 5 years? Egypt. So he's not there. So they're like, we saw him, we blessed, we worshiped, now we're leaving, and the star appears again. When you leave religion is when you're going to see the star again. You're not going to see the star in religion, the glory of God, and you're not going to see the glory of God outside of religion. I mean, only when you leave religion, you'll see the glory of God. Religion is incapable of unveiling Christ in his light and glory. You see, all this is in Matthew 1 and 2. Now, when you leave religion or denominationalism, you're going to find the glory of God, because that's all man-made stuff. When they left Jerusalem, the star appeared to them again. If you go to the religious people, attempt to follow the dead letter of the law, you're going to miss the heavenly star, and you will not find Christ. Because that's all religion knows, is the letter of the law. Not just 10 commandments, but steps, secrets, keys, formulas, methods, programs. That's all under the guise of letter. And there's no life in that. Now watch. You may have been saved in religion. But if Christ is unveiled, religion will no longer suffice you. So in other words, because I got saved in the church. After 10 years, I had to walk away from. Because and I think we just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, but I worked at a Christian television station. So here I am being bombarded with all kinds of truth and religion. And, at that time in the 80s, you had Rick Godwin, James Robinson, Dudley Hall. Come on, give me some more. Who else? We talked about this. These guys were on the cutting edge of what God was doing in that period of time. And I'm watching this going, oh my God, it's like truth and glory and man. But my church wasn't even coming close to preaching this stuff. So of course I believe it. So when I speak at my church, and this is a huge church in Fairmont, when I speak there, I get lampooned, I'm like, wait, this is truth, and get pounded over some. I'm like, and I knew my days were numbered there. And this not just happened once. It was another church that in between ministries, in between churches, I was going to one. The guy asked me to speak because he knew I was. And afterwards, man, he just came out and I said to my wife, I said, I'll never speak for him again. And it was just common sense theology. And I'm like, the day's expired here too. There's an expiration date here. But let me wait till I get to this. Now that's just introduction. Wait, now watch what I pull out of all this. I just wanted you to see Matthew 1 and 2. Finding Jesus is absolutely outside of religion. I don't care whether you were saved in it or not. Well, God, yeah, He used it, but He's not going to keep you there. Now watch this. I was saved outside of religion. Let me tell you, I had a grandmother who lived right next door to me who was the most religious person I knew. Legalistic. Oh my God, I mean, she was hard on us and our sins. And she'd always try to get me to go to church. This is in Fairmont. Tried to get me, I'm like, I'm not going to church. I'm like in the 5th grade. I'm not going to church, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I'm not going to church. So she would go up to her sister's or her daughter's house to get the 3 kids that she had, and she'd keep them on the weekend. And these were my cousins that I loved to hang out with. So they, by force, was taken to church every Sunday. Because they're staying with her, they got to go. And I just sit there and wait for them to come back, and then we'd hang out and do our thing. But you could not get me to go. Then I had a guy, I became a paper boy in the 8th grade, had over 100 customers, and I remember back in that day, you had to go door to door to collect. You may remember that? When you had papers, you had to stamp that thing. So I'd watch people hide from me, and I'm like, I see you. What do you? I have to come back tomorrow. But this one house, I would get my friend to go with me and say, go collect. And here's $5 if you go down there and collect. Why don't you go? I said, because every time I go, they're always asking me to go to church, and I ain't got nothing to do with that. I'm tired of saying no. If God come to my house, I'd be the one not answering the door. As I recognize him through the window, he's there to preach Jesus. I got a grandmother next door. I got this guy on my tail, and I don't want nothing to do with it. I had no attraction to the religious realm. Okay? So I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm sitting there, and the Spirit, the star, if you will. Now, that's not a literal star, by the way. Okay? I don't know what it was, but what God showed them. But to them, he used a star because that's what they were familiar with, being in astronomy and astrology. God's going to use what you, in your darkness, is familiar with. So you don't come to people with 4 steps, 5 secrets, or 4 spiritual laws. That's foreign to them. So they could use religion to work on me, and it's not going to work because you don't know how to reach me in my darkness with your super spirituality. You cannot go to people with your Christianese language and all the stuff you practice every Sunday, and that's foreign to them. You got to find out a way. That's why I believe in friend. Be a friend. Know where they're at. Find out who they are. And you reach them a lot more effectively because you're getting into the pig pen with them. Right. You're getting into the darkness with them. Mm-hmm. You're not saying, get your act together and I'll be your friend. Right. Anyway, so I'm sitting there in my chair, and my uncle, which my grandmother lived next door, and he lived with her, he tried to commit suicide, found him in the bathtub of blood, and he was my hero. And he survived. But I'm like, this, if he can't, if life doesn't work for him, who I modeled my life after in every possible way, including drugs, because we weren't saved, neither one of us. And he was only 6 years older than me. So I'm like, I just hit rock bottom. Because there was other things going on too, but that one was like the straw that broke the back. Now I'm telling you this for a reason. Because though I knew about God, I didn't know God. Mm-hmm. And no one came to me and said, now, it was the Spirit set me down in that chair, and someone, probably that guy, had given me a give Christ charge of your life, a credit card, like a Visa. Remember the old Visa, the circles? And it said, give Christ charge of your life, credit card. And on the back was the steps. That's all I knew. No one was there. And I thought, well, I'll do what this thing says. And I did it. And then it was not even around 2 weeks or so that I was friends with that guy who kept witnessing to me that I wouldn't go to their house to collect. I was friends with his son. And we were talking and said, yeah, come to church, man. I told him about getting saved and all that. And the rest is history, and that's the church I ended up in Fairlawn. Now my point in that, and it even gets even more interesting. So I go to this church, and there's this kid, and he's different, he's weird, and he's very, very religious. And he goes to my school. He's a year younger than me, so he's a freshman, I'm a sophomore. And he carries around this big Bible. There's no kids here. I'm going to be on. He carried around this big ass Bible. And it was one of those that go on your coffee table. That's how, and I'm like, man, he's just a weirdo. And nobody went around him. He just, his religiosity just turned everybody off. And he's in the youth group. He goes to church there. And so they asked me to pray. I don't know how to pray. And I remember saying, amen, rather than amen. I don't think that matters. But it obviously mattered in that because he made fun of, oh man, you don't know how to pray. And I'm like, dude, whatever, But what happened is that God called me to that church, and I became a leader in that youth group and surpassed him beyond anything that you can imagine. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not tooting my own horn, just telling you the truth. And Willie, all the guys, we talk, the guys, they'll vouch for that. Mm-hmm. And I became one of the biggest leaders in the huge church, huge youth group, and started speaking and ministering. But I always thought, Lord, why did you not use this kid who already had way more Bible knowledge, way ahead of me, because his dad was a pastor. He grew up in the church, so he knew all the Bible. I didn't know. They asked me, prophet. What's a prophet? I said, that's when you make money. No, it isn't. I'm like, yes, it is. No, it's a prophet is a person who speaks for God. That's how dumb I was. I'll tell you how dumb I was. I was going to read through the Bible, and I get to Matthew, and you don't read through the Bible every day. I miss 2 or 3 days or a week. And so when I get through Matthew finally, I get to Luke, and I'm like, I'm reading the same story. And I'm like, oh, I must have messed up. So I go to Mark. Missed a couple days or so. I get to Mark. Oh, I just read that. What's going on? So somebody messing with me. So I go to Luke. I didn't know there was a thing called synoptic gospels. I didn't know these guys were saying the same story. That's how dumb I was. Okay? Now my point in that is, this is all, God did not go for a guy who was in religion, that boy. He goes to a guy who's bucking against religion, doesn't want nothing to do with it, but God knew how to speak my language, met me in my darkness, drew me out of it, and put me where this kid was. I don't know, we never were close, never really hardly talked to him, because there was always that, I don't know, a gulf between us, and it must have made him really unhappy that God used me and not him. Now, I say that because here's somebody who's in religion who doesn't get used, and someone who's outside of it, he plucks that guy out, throws him in there, and says, there he is, deal with him. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. But my point in telling you that is not to toot my horn, except to say, I had to step back and go, how humbling that is. Lord, you really don't use religion or religious people because you got no use for them because they've got no use for you. All they have a use for is what they're familiar with called religion. That's what they work.
Right.
That's what they seek. That's what they'll die over and divide from.
Right.
Is all that religious stuff. And God, Jesus said, it's about me. It's about a person. And but anyway, let me move on. So then there comes a time, and here's where I really want to zero in on. What time is it? Good. Here's what I want to really zero in on. There comes a time, okay, I graduate from high school, I start working for a television station, and working there, being involved in all kinds of ministries and preachers and everything, know most of the preachers from Clarksburg, know all the stories behind the scenes, all the good, the bad, the ugly. And God's just got me in, and that was my previous, before I went and got my certificates and stuff from Bible college, that was my Bible college. Nevertheless, I'm growing up into this thing, and as I told you earlier, I came to a place where I'm like, I can't stay in this denomination, and I can't be licensed anymore with the Assemblies of God. I had to make a break. And it was very convenient to break away from my church because I was moving to Arizona. So I broke away from the church first, using the move as my out, just happened to be that way. Then I get to Arizona and God takes me out of the denomination. So when I'm coming back, after 3 years I'm coming back. Now mind you, all my friends are at Trinity Assembly of God. That's where I grew up, that's where I did everything. And I said, I can't go back to that. I can't go back to that. I no longer believe in a lot of things that they believe. I'm going where the cloud's moving. Okay? Now the cloud ain't moving there. That's a good church. They do great work. They preach what they preach. Nevertheless, I'm going to tell you something. You have to be about unveiling Jesus. Mm-hmm. I don't care how big the church is, how great it is, how this, that is. If you're not in the business of unveiling Jesus, what are you in the business for? If it's not about Christ, if Christ is not the sum of all things, and he can't be a sidebar. He can't be somebody you add to your 12-step program. He can't, because he will not share the glory with the letter of the law.
Right.
He's not going to do that. So I had to make a decision, and I made so many enemies. And people that should have still embraced me cut me off because I would not go back to that church. And I went to another church. You know that guy we talked about, Gary Kisner. Because he was moving in the grace message. He graduated from Oral Roberts. He seemed to be less religious and more grace-oriented. And the Lord, I felt the Lord told me to go there. Now I'm saying all that for a reason. Now here's where I want to take you. Why is it that we are... Now let me back up. Israel could never stay at one place at one time. Remember, what were they following in the daytime? A cloud. What were they following at nighttime? Pillar of fire. Why was God always moving them around? Because the Spirit never wants you to stay in one place. He's always moving you to new experiences that unveil who God is. Now, the physical reason for that is, if you've got 600,000 men, they only counted men, 600,000 men in the wilderness, and if each one had at least 3 kids and a wife, what does that come to? Wow. They had to move because of their own waste. How many times you go to the bathroom a day? What are you going to do with all that? There's no sanitation. So God had to move them for the purpose of them not wallowing in their own waste and getting disease and everything. So God, in the physical, but that's also a spirit. Remember, everything in the Bible is you got to see what the spiritual. Remember, we talked about that. What's the veil? The veil is they had to be moved because of waste. But what's the spiritual reason? You're not going to like what I'm going to tell you. Because when God moved them to this place, they're like, this is nice. No waste. Flat land, there's a well over there. This is great. We're staying here. And they wake up, and in the middle of the night, they see the pillar of fire, and they have to pack. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when that pillar of fire moves, they got to move too. Or if it's in the daytime, they got to pack everything up and move with it, whether they like it or not. And the reason is because let me put it this way. We love revival. And the revival is great. But revival can be, today's revival is your deliverance, but today's revival, tomorrow, is your downfall. So what God worked in your life that worked and was great, He's not going to return to it and keep working it. You got it. It's great. Now, there's another veil. Be removed. You can enter into another aspect of who God is in you, who God is to you. God will never let you stay in a past movement. That's why these movements never last. Remember Promise Keepers? Oh, how great thou art. Every band had to be in Promise Keepers. Well, if it was so great, why isn't the fad today? What happened? Did we decide we don't want to do oaths anymore? We don't want to, men, we don't want to keep promises anymore? What happened? It's bankrupt. So that makes me think, that may have been valid for a season, but it has an expiration date on it, and we got to move on.
Right.
You follow?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is how we become religious. It works, it's great, and that's what I'm holding on to. Oh, that's the thing that works today is not going to be the thing that works tomorrow. The movement and the season that you're going through right now is not going to, you can't hold on to that because you got another one coming.
Right.
You can't hold on to 2021. Nobody wants to. Hell, you don't want to go back to 2020, period. I can't tell you the year I want to go back to. I think 70s, but yet an adult can tell you, oh my God, did you live the 70s? Well, as a kid I did, but I didn't know we had inflation in the 70s. Remember the gas? You could only go through, you could only get gas on the day that you had an odd number or an even number. Come to find out years later, there was never such a thing as a gas shortage.
Right.
Lied to back then. So I don't know. Every decade, every season, you don't want to have the Azusa Street revival, the Wales revival. As great as that was, it's over. You can go back and pull on it all day long. It ain't going to get resurrected. Now, let's make it personal. I'm sorry, but you may not be at your job much longer. There might be an expiration date on it. The guy says, we're moving. But God, no, we're moving. I got something else for you. Hopefully not, because who wants to keep changing jobs? But it could be schools, it could be jobs, it could be neighborhoods, but oh, whoa, let me tell you what it's going to be. More than anything, friends. A.W. Tozer said, the closer I get to Jesus, the less evangelical friends I have.
Yeah.
So who used to be a dynamite friend in the 80s is a guy I can't stand in the 90s. Not that I hate him, just so religious, man. Something I changed, they didn't. I moved with the cloud, they stayed behind in the waist.
Oh, wow.
And I can't deal with it. Sorry, I won't deal with it. I love you, but I am not communing with you. I'm not breaking bread with you. You're not going to have an influence in my life because I don't want that poison. All you're going to do is talk garbage in my well and stuff me all up. Because any of us can be deceived. That was Paul's fear in the Corinthian church, that you would be deceived like Eve was in the garden. We're all susceptible to, because we also have blind spots that we're letting someone talk to us in our blind spot, creating more veils and strongholds that I can't recognize because it's a blind spot to me. So friends are going to come and go. Churches are going to come and go. And if that could happen here. That you're like, I'm just not getting anything anymore. Okay, that's fine. Go where you go. I mean, the owner of McDonald's. I'm sure I don't know if he still does, but there was a time in the 80s and 90s that one guy owned most of the McDonald's here in the area. Does he care what McDonald's you go to? Well, East Point, Nutter Fort, Bridgeport.
No.
Does he care?
Nope.
As long as you go to McDonald's, same hamburger.
Right.
Okay, so he doesn't. So I don't own the market on church. So if somebody's preaching Christ, And they're unveiling him in a way that you're like, oh my God, I'm getting this thing. Then you got to go. And I'll bless you going. Now that doesn't, I mean, people leave churches all the time, but for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
I want you to leave because the glory is somewhere else. Then I got to say, okay, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong here? And then that helps me. Or God may just be moving you on because a guy has a different message you need to hear. But the good thing about keeping that from happening a lot is YouTube and all this stuff. Now you can watch a guy every Sunday from somewhere and stay where you're at.
Right.
Okay, I'm not promoting any. I'm just saying, don't be surprised when you wake up one day in church and go, oh, crap, the cloud just moved. And if you don't move with that cloud, you wallow in the waste. Not that they have waste, but what worked, what was good for you that they had is now becoming waste. You will become bitter, angry, and probably they'll see it and ask you to leave when you should have left when the cloud moved. Same thing with a job. Yeah, I refuse to leave. Well, then God's going to make it hard on you there. Because the Spirit's always moving. This is why we become so religious. Here's the religious problem. We don't keep looking to the cloud for fresh experiences and unveilings. Well, let me put it this way. New unveilings of who Christ is in us that brings us into fresh expressions and experiences. We hold on to what's been working for the last 10 years here, and I'm telling you, I am sick of it. That's what, did I not tell you guys that in church a couple weeks ago? I can't go around this mountain anymore. I like where we are, where we've been, but I can't stay here anymore.
Right.
Go to Deuteronomy chapter 1. I was going to use this Sunday morning. I still may, and then I'm done. I may not, it's in that chapter 1. I may not find it because I probably don't have it in this Bible, underlined in this Bible. Chapter 1, verse 6. The Lord our God said to us, Israel, at Horeb, you have been long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance into the hill. So in other words, he's saying, you've been here too long. Get ready to move. And we're always, if you really wanted the truth, we're always being moved by the Holy Spirit who's leading and guiding us into all truth. Do you have all truth? No. He's going to lead you and guide you into it. And it may be different places, different expressions, different experiences, but you've got to keep your eyes on Christ. Not the church, not the fads, not anything else, but Christ. And when Christ is not being unveiled, you got to move on. You got to move on. You got to move on. Or you're going to wallow in the waste of religion, and it's going to kill you eventually. What ends up happening is you're going to start seeing sins come up. You're going to get weak in areas. You're no longer on the cutting edge of what the Spirit is doing because you decided to stay when the cloud moved. So the cloud is moving because it is the principle of the Lord. He, the Spirit of God, knows when you've been at the mountain too long. Now, how will I know? And I'll close with this. How do I know? Let me jump down because I'm going to skip a lot of notes here, but they're there for you to look at. How will I know when that time is? Man, I really wanted to do the closing there. Daggone it. I got to. John the Baptist points to Jesus as the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Mm-hmm. Who's the two disciples that follow him? Starts following Jesus. Andrew and John. And Andrew is Peter's brother. Okay, so Andrew and John start following Jesus. He says, and they're following him. Once John points him out, they make a beeline to him. Question: why doesn't John make a beeline to him? I'll show you. Can see later the disciples of Jesus because they're baptizing. This is John chapter 3. They're baptizing more people in water than John is now. This is where John says, I must decrease so that he can increase. Question number 2, why are the disciples not following Jesus? Right. Nobody can answer that. If he's the Messiah, greater than John the Baptist, why am I still with him? The cloud moved from John to Jesus. And you still got a cluster of people who refuse to move with the cloud. And then they get angry. Remember I said you stay in your waist, you get sent. They start getting angry. In fact, you know what they refer to Jesus as? Not the Messiah. Hey, that guy you pointed out. That guy you pointed out? They didn't care for him. And when he's baptizing more people in water than them, he's got fame now, fortune. They don't have it anymore. The cloud moved off of them over to here, and you better move with it, but they didn't. So here's another question. Why does God have to pluck Paul, who said, I was born out of time? I shouldn't be part of this thing. I persecuted the church. Why did God pluck Paul out of where he was at and give him 2/3 of the revelation of the New Testament and not the 12 disciples? Because they were still tied to the temple. They were tied to religion. They were tied to the Old Testament, the law. They couldn't, though they saw Jesus, they couldn't make the break. He told them to go into all the world. They stayed in Jerusalem. Why? He said, go to all the nations, and Peter refuses to go to an Italian guy's house called Cornelius because he's prejudiced. So you don't want to read the scriptures because they don't really make the guys look all that great. They don't glow in the dark. So my point is, the cloud's moving, and these guys can't move from being Jew only to all nations. They can't go from it's about the temple, it's about this, it's about that, to Jesus, who is now the fulfillment of all that. So God has to go outside of religion, and because these guys were on the cutting edge, they stuck with what they knew. That's my whole point. Religion happens to all of us when we get stuck with what's familiar and what's comfortable. And then we end up going through the motions. And we become religious. Now, how do I know when the Spirit is moving? Because there'll be this is what some of what the Lord showed me this morning. There'll be a cry in your spirit. And this is what you'll do. You won't have language for it. So you got to not listen so much about what's coming out of the mouth. The cry is in your spirit, and it's being filtered through an unrenewed mind, and you may say something you don't mean because you don't have the language to discern what's happening in the cry. It's happened to me. But I knew better, and I would wake up going, I can't do this anymore. I can't go through this anymore. There's got to be a change here. Something's wrong. And then the thought, well, should I resign? Should I just move? I can't do this. This is old. I'm in my waist. The cloud has moved. I can't get to where it's at. That's why I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm not doing this anymore. We're not going to go around the mountain again in 2021. And we're moving on. This is why the emphasis is on ignite. We're getting the hell out of 2021. Okay? And we're moving into the light, and we're going to experience the glory. We're going to get all the waste out of our wells so we can have the rivers of living water. We're going to get back to the cutting edge of what God is doing in the spirit. And I want to separate spirit from physical because it always gets on earth as is in heaven. Jesus synced that. But you know what I mean. I'm not going to follow the ways of the world. Oh, God, there's so much. You got to one day remind me to share on how we all become virgins again. God gave me goosebumps. God is putting together virgins again. I don't want to do it. Maybe after I turn the cameras off, you want to hang around, we'll talk about it. How will I know the Spirit's moving? You will start to drift, you'll wonder, you'll have this cry, you won't have language for it, but hang in there, let the cry happen, because the Holy Spirit will give you the language for it by renewing your mind, and the Spirit will enlighten you. And here's the answer. He points you back to Jesus. Mm-hmm. The cry is you're drifting from the person, and you're getting involved with what's familiar, what's comfortable. You want to go around the mountain again, and the Spirit's refusing. That mountain was great 5 years ago. But daggone, move on. Right? And you know what we don't like more than anything? Change. God, I just got comfortable here. I just got all my theology right in line where I want it, and now you drop this bomb, it's going to it's going to undo everything. Good. Good. Can I tell you something? You're not going to like it. And if any guy out there who's a preacher or pastor or teacher tells you different, he's a bold-faced liar. It's not popular, what I'm about to say, because it won't put a lot of security in you. And that is, every time I get up here to speak, I got to know that this message is over with when I walk out that door. Meaning this, I probably won't preach it again because I'll find more truth that makes this message obsolete. Augustine, who has one of the greatest works, volumes, Augustine, how you want to pronounce it, had an encounter with God on his deathbed. He saw the glory of God. And this is a man who is a patristic, who's a church father, who is, you just can't, valuable works that men had, acclaimed and preached and sought after. He on his deathbed, he has an encounter, and he makes this statement: all my works are straw. Means nothing. I saw the Lord. And when I heard that Leonard Sweet, the guy who wrote that book, that Jesus Manifesto, when I heard him this past summer on a webinar say that, it undid me. I'm like, oh my. And then he goes on to say the same thing happened to Ambrose, I think that's his name, around 10 BC or 10 AD. And he's a big writer, and he's working on one of the biggest works that's going to be phenomenal. And he's halfway through, and he has an encounter with Jesus. And he says, everything I've wrote is done. I cannot go back and finish that work. I refuse to. They begged him. They pleaded with him. Finish the book. He's refused. I saw the Lord. We're wrong. We're nowhere near. It's all, when you see nothing, it's just, and so what I'm saying, they're lying if they don't tell you this. What I'm saying is only a fraction of the truth. And I got to know that. So I don't hang on to my past sermons. This is why I battle all the time with keeping my sermons on the internet, on YouTube, because I will preach them totally different today than I did. I did a verse by verse of Galatians in 06 that people have, that's been online for years, not now. I couldn't do that again. That's dumb. I've learned so much since 06 about the grace of God, and it's going to be a whole different message. See what I'm saying? At one time, I promoted the 06 Galatians. But I wouldn't have you go back and listen to that knowing what I know now. I have to redo it, which one day maybe we will. My point is, I ain't all that. And my messages ain't all that. And if all I can do is be the one to just let you see Jesus a little bit clearer through this, then that's all it needs. You don't need to camp out here. To let it take you where it goes, because tomorrow's a different message. He'll unveil something different, and we will move on to something greater in understanding and enlightenment. So I don't want to demean these messages, but they're only a fraction of his unveiling, because there's so much there. And we're not going to go back to old teachings. We're going to keep revamping them, renewing them, getting more enlightenment on them, and keep pushing this thing forward. Because like Paul, we're going to press forward to what lies ahead. What's he pressing forward to? Christ. Christ. Isn't he the one that says, I count all things done? So he would say that about all his writings, that if to gain Christ, I will give it all up to gain more of Christ. Right. So, anyway, any questions or comments?
I just have to say that what I was telling you, I heard that God's not repetitious, so he's always new.
Yeah. Just
like the manna they try to keep and
that's
spoil. But so every day, that's when you were saying, you leave here and this message is because God's going to have something new at all times.
Listen to what he just says. The manna. It just makes sense. I know I would be a manna keeper. I got a freezer right now. I got a freezer and 2 refrigerators packed with chicken, fish, and meat, man. I'm ready for the Armageddon. I'm ready for whatever they throw at me. I'm packed to the hill. I can't buy anymore. I know I would keep manna. And God says, ain't happening. Because if you keep it, I'm going to make it wormy. So in my case, you better eat it. It's going to get freezer burnt. Can't hold on to that. Got to eat it. But my point is that you wake up every morning and you have a ritual. And that's okay. Make sure the ritual doesn't have you.
Right.
You wake up, and this is what I woke up this morning. Lord, I got all these things I got to do, and I don't want to do them. I don't want to get out of bed. It's still dark out. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do nothing. I'm despondent here. And that's when the cry. Just give me Jesus. Just give me the tree. What came was, just give me the tree of life. I'll get through everything in the tree of life by holding on to the tree of life. Have you ever been driving somewhere and you daydream and you like, oh my God, I just been through that town. I didn't even see nothing. I mean, you miss turnoffs because you're like, oh man. How many have done that? When you're in the Spirit and you're feeding from the tree of life, you're going to get through life, and it's not going to be hard on you. You're going to do the stuff. He didn't say, okay, well, just don't do it. No, but you're going to do it out of life, out of Christ, because He's the main thing. I could have woke up and the things would have been the main things. But my spirit wouldn't let me look at the day that way. He said, no, let's look at Christ, and let's do these things through the tree of life. And that's what made me think, oh, you're speaking something here. And then as I meditated on it, this message came about. We're so easy to return back to the letter, to the ritual, to the thing at hand that we always. So you may wake up I tell you, where you want to be is no ritual,
Right.
because every day is going to be a fresh expression. You're not going to keep doing the same stuff. Christ will say, "We're doing this morning. We're doing that this morning. We're going to intercede. We're going to pray. We're going to fast." I know you didn't think about that one, but we're going to fast this morning. Or this one, we're going to worship this morning. Yeah, but God, I got my Bible to read through. I got to read through the Bible this year. No, we're worshiping. Or He may have you give a topic in your mind. And so all of a sudden you wake up and you hear the word mercy. Well, what do you think's happening? You're going to have to go find some stuff on mercy, and He'll lead you to. He wants to speak to you about mercy, not interceding for grandma next door.
Right.
So you think, oh, I'm going to pray for grandma next door. Remind me to pray for you guys who have your issues, your prayer needs. But you see what I'm saying? Be fresh. Don't return to ritual, religion, or the letter. Wake up, Lord, what are we doing? That's going to be hard, because when you don't hear anything, you're going to resort back to, well, I'll go do what I do normally. But go in the presence and wait there. Remember we talked about the waiting? You may go a whole month waiting and not hearing anything, then it breaks through. So I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to wait. And I can't tell you how to walk this out. I'm just kind of giving you ideas. You and the Spirit have to work this out, okay? That's all I'm saying.
Amen.
Questions or comments? Yeah, that one. Anything else?
Don't forget about the snow.
Oh, yeah. Sunday and Monday, I guess we're supposed to get some snow. And I don't know. I've heard a few things bad. Then it might go, what, you say south, stay south. I don't know. But I'm not, most of you guys are out of town to come to Fairmont. So if it's looks, bad, we're not going to have church. We're not going to chance it. It's not. I just don't feel to do that, to chance it with people, and because if anything, you can go back and re-listen to some of the Sunday's messages and get them better under your belt and get a better understanding of them, or this one. So not going to hurt you to listen to something twice, right?
Or
So-
you can just put a new one on.
Yeah. Well, hey, if the Spirit says get online and go live, I'll do it. But you know, he pulled that rug out from under me February of last year. I was doing a Tuesday podcast, and I hit a wall. He said, "That's it, no more for a while." And I haven't done a Tuesday podcast since February. I think about it, but I don't do it because it's not what he's doing right now. So, and radio, same thing. I want to do that. I want to get, like, nope. So, it is what it is.